What has traumatized you for life? I was 14 years old when I saw my 3-year-old baby brother's head crushed under the front tire of a car. I'm now 63. And have decided that I should deal with it rather than denying that it messed me up. Attempted suicide of my girlfriend of 10 years. Then a completed suicide a year later. The second anniversary of her death is next week. Can't sleep. Lost 40 pounds. Still here because her now 17-year-old dog needs me. Edit. Thank you everyone who reached out. Promise I'm okay and am not going to do anything rash. My brother, cousin and girlfriend all took their lives in April of different years. I would never put the people in my life through that. Thanks for caring strangers. Edit 2. I figured this would be buried. With all the atrocities happening in the world. All of you have made me feel better about people in general. If I didn't reply or comment, it's because I'm pretty overwhelmed by the care shown by all of you. It's really dusty in here. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. A friend died right in front of me doing sprints in track practice. He was 16. Biggest smile and the friendliest guy in the whole school. We were doing sprints, 200 meters, and no shit on the last one he just collapsed right at the finish. Eyes rolled back. Foaming at the mouth. Turning blue. I ran to the weight room and got my football coach. We ran back to Adam laying in the same spot. They started doing CPR and I can remember my football coach yelling, "Come on Adam." The ambulance got there and continued CPR. Loaded him up. But he was gone. Turned out he had a valve that was just a bit off in his heart. This guy was an athlete though. 5th place the year before at the Wisconsin State Wrestling Tournament. Our school had a bunch of freak deaths for some reason. Now I'm a firefighter, EMT full-time and do what I can for people when they need help the most. Edit. I never knew so many people would support me in telling this. I always kept it buried deep down. Thanks to each and every one of you. Edit 2. To all of you who have experienced similar events. I hope you can find peace. It really does help to talk to someone about it. I've held in most things from my life. And finally going to therapy now at age 30 has been very beneficial. I saw a horrible car accident happen last year. I was the first one to the scene. The driver of one car wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I sat with him. Tried to get him talking. Monitored his breathing. Looked for bleeding. Somebody else called 911. He stopped breathing in my arms mere seconds before help arrived. They weren't able to save him. At the age of 11, my father went into the basement to work on some parts. This was quite common. My mother had just gotten home from work and went to take a shower. 20 minutes go by and she gets out. Wondering where my father is. We go and check on him in the basement. To my shock, he is lying on the floor. His tongue out. Blue in the face. Not moving. Or breathing. He had died from a sudden heart attack. My mother and I tried for over an hour to resuscitate him with CPR. It took that whole time frame for an ambulance to arrive. They did nothing but declare that he was dead. The 3rd anniversary of his death was 3 days ago. It never gets easier trying to understand that he will never be back. I will forever be traumatized by this event. Finding my son dead. I'll never get over it. I had constantly been abused in my mother's house from my stepdad since around 6 years old. And since my mother was absent working all the time. She didn't really notice when he would hit both me and my brother. He's 4 years younger than me. My stepdad was a drunk. Never gotten into the working business. And when he did, it was a good thing for me and my little brother to be away from that sort of stuff. I had always been like a mother figure to my brother. Because I had to fill in the position. We grew up together as close as 2 siblings could be. Fast forward years later. I had to be 14 at the time. My stepdad came home one day and said he was tired of me and his son ignoring him and asking to be let out of the house. He was a helicopter parent. And since my mother had recently had another baby boy. I was taking care of him in my room. Probably giving him his bottle and trying to sleep. After ignoring him, like we always try to do, my stepdad came in. Took the baby and proceeded to throw him against my door. Mother instinct came in and I automatically fought back for that baby. Until the tables turned and my stepdad pulled out a gun. At this point in time, my 2 brothers were in the room with me watching him take the safety off. He grabbed me by my shirt and pinned up against the wall. At gunpoint, he had yelled at me and kept me pinned for 40 minutes saying how bad of a daughter I was and ungrateful towards the family. It took a lot of maturity to swallow my pride and admit he was right. So he wouldn't shoot me in front of those boys. I was suicidal at the time, so I didn't really react besides anger. And I wouldn't have cared if he did shoot me BC, there would eventually be a case on it anyways. But I couldn't leave my brothers without their sister. It was scary, traumatizing for all three of us. Looking back on it, I'm still disgusted of how at as little as 6 years old I was forced to settle on a position I'd never want to take up. I'm glad he finally left those boys alone as soon as I moved away. And as for my mom, she confessed that she knew the abuse had been going on, saying it was a test of how adult I could be at a time. I haven't talked to her since. I was violently raped in an alley by a stranger. But maybe the even more fucked up part was the way I was treated by people who are supposed to help you afterwards. When I went to the hospital for the rape kit, where you are basically in a vulnerable situation all over that I won't even describe. The woman said, "Wow, there's a lot of semen in there," which made me cry. Then the reporting process was fucking horrible. In recorded interviews, the detective asked me things like, why didn't I scream and how could this have happened when there was an officer patrolling that very busy area. Then they fucked up my rape kit. There was no justice, and honestly, if it ever happened to me again, I would not report it. This country does not care. Now I have PTSD and can't go out at night. I also have PTSD from another traumatic event I won't go into. But I'm working on it in EMDR therapy. Except now my therapist got a new job. So I have to start with someone new and IDK if I can take it. Dad, who lived alone at the time, took his life with a firearm in the tub. My mom and I cleaned it up. I was 19. Almost 25 now, and it affects me every day. Mobile. Apologies. Edit. Damn. I wasn't expecting so much feedback. I struggle with replying, so I'll blanket a few things. First of all, thank you everyone for the kind words. I have been on a long therapeutic, psychiatric journey since and am doing better these days. I really don't want to undermine my mother here, since we are now very close and she's one of the very few of my tiny support system. And it just wouldn't be helpful to place blame on her. For those of you asking why she would let me help. Herself and my older brother were trying to keep me from seeing the scene at all, since my dad and I were particularly close. My adult brother was supposed to help her but essentially got sick before even starting. My mom was prepared to do it by herself and I wouldn't let her, plus she didn't know that I had peaked before I found out it wouldn't get cleaned automatically by a special team. And yes, the service is not automatic. We hardly had enough for the cremation alone, and the cleanup would apparently have been almost double according to my mom. My dad was also poverty level. Good eye those of you who called that this happened in the good old USA. So sorry for those of you who can relate. My heart goes out to you. Edit. Please don't kill yourself. This was 2 months ago. My girlfriend and I had just been on a spa stay at a fancy hotel. She gave it for my birthday like a year ago. But because of COVID, we couldn't get the opportunity. Anyway, we are driving home pretty tired and happy because of the stay we had. As we are driving just outside a city, I look to my left, and I see a woman walk on a path at the side of the road. Just 100 meters up the highway, a car comes speeding and he takes a sharp right turn, hitting the woman. It was pretty dark, but in his light I could literally see her body explode into pieces. In shock, I brick the brake. My girlfriend screams. And not because she saw it. I screamed, that car just fucking hit her. She doesn't understand, but I tell her to stay in the car, as she is very thankful for me to say to this day today. Why? Because what I later on saw was pure chaos. It was only me at the scene. I had to walk up to dead body parts and a clearly drunk driver and still take this situation under control and call 911. I'm not gonna go into detail since I'm still dealing with the horror I saw there. All I can say is that ever since that night, I have no longer taken a sip of a beer, driven at night, or just casual speeding. Sorry for typos. Daily psychological abuse by veteran alcoholic father when mom wasn't home. He'd have me stand in a corner and stare at it for the whole day. Usually as punishment for something small like making a noise while I eat or crying when he screamed. I wasn't allowed to move and he'd constantly spy on me to see if I obeyed. I never knew when I'd get out of the corner. That was the trick. No freedom and not knowing when you'd get out. Then mom would come home around 4 to 5 p.m. and I'd be free. Then there was the physical abuse. No sexual abuse, at least, thank God. My wife leaving me on December 26, 21. Followed by my mom dying in my home on January 22, 22. Followed by my dad dying of natural causes on the 9th of February 22. Followed by some other smaller issues which have negatively impacted my life. Edit. Thank you all for your wonderful and amazing comments. Your support means a lot. It's more than I've gotten from most of my actual friends IRL. Who say they're there for me, but lagged at the funeral or when I needed them most. I'm re-evaluating life now and will take a small self-care vacation soon. Edit 2. My mother died from COVID. One night she was here, cooking, talking normally. The next morning we found her dead. COVID had filled her lungs and at some point oxygen stopped going to her brain, causing it to be covered in diffusions. She was not vaccinated. Edit 3. My dad lived several states away, so the timing was just surreal. I have been tasked with caring for my stepdad who had just only recently began to accept that she's gone. Also, the wife and I have been in talks to work things out, but it's been hard with my Phil here. I really do need to get away. When I was 17, my boyfriend killed himself by jumping into traffic. His body was pulverized and scattered all over the road and run over hundreds of times. The police spray painted every piece. It was a highway that I would normally drive over regularly. I drove over it once and lost it. For 5 years I took the long way around until the paint faded. Not being shown affection as a baby or child. I have grown up with severe separation issues. Am clingy, afraid of everything, and made bad decisions about relationships, i.e., being with someone just so I'm not alone. It really affects you for life. Please hug your kids and tell them you love them every day. It's so simple but is so important. Worked night shift in a trauma center years ago. Right before shift change, we got a call from EMS. They were bringing us a patient after a motor vehicle accident, with CPR in progress. Turns out, it was one of our coworkers on her way to work. EMS got a pulse back, but she died a few days later. I'll never forget the quiet shock trauma room when EMS rolled in with her. I'll never forget taking her off of the Lucas device, a machine that does the chest compressions part of CPR, and feeling the frigidity of her hands. Seeing her familiar scrubs, her work badge, her signature nursing shoes. When I was 6, I was running home from school and I fell in some deep body of water and it pulled me away and I was deep under it for a good minute and I remember it was dark and couldn't breathe until my cousin and my dad managed to catch up and get me out. Now I'm scared of pools, beaches, lakes, and type of body of water, especially the ones I can't see the bottom of. My mother's helicopter parenting. Now that I have to take care of her in her old age, she throws a fucking temper tantrum at the slightest hint that things aren't going to go her way. Just now she wants chicken soup. She took an hour to explain how to make chicken soup. Her version has 5 ingredients. I suggested adding some herbs for flavoring. And she is currently screaming down the hall at me about how stupid I am for not knowing how to make chicken soup. Every interaction is like this. I wish she would die soon so I can have my sanity back. Edit. For current events. My wife had 2 dogs when we got married. Those 2 walking stomachs taught me to love dogs and quite a few other important life lessons. We put down our wiener dog a few years ago due to failing health. I had her in my lap when the vet administered the injection. Didn't want to leave her to pass on some cold table. It was important that she left this life close to her daddy and mommy who loved her very much. Just feeling her pass while lying on top of me was an intense feeling to say the least. I have so many mixed feelings about it. I don't think I'll ever properly process them. Our chihuahua was never the same after that. Basically stopped eating. We had to buy some special fresh dog food for her to even entice her to eat. One day I set out her lunch and then went to get her. At that point she was already blind and mostly deaf and needed our assistance to take her outside to potty or to get to her lunch. I found her dead. I really don't remember much else. It was especially heartbreaking because I had just checked on her not half an hour ago and she was fine. I was really angry for a bit. Eventually my wife and I healed and moved on. But whenever I see topics like this, the hurt comes back. I feel compelled to write out the story every time though. I don't want to forget. Sexual abuse by a maternal uncle that was never acknowledged by my parents. Was forced to be around my abuser even though I told them about the abuse. When I was 5 years old. It started when I was about 2 and didn't end until after I turned 8. My mother was even a character witness for him in court when I was in my late 20s. A positive character witness. Childhood medical trauma. First considered suicide at 7. And will not visit a doctor even if it feels like I'm dying. Medical trauma is no joke, homies. Paramedic and 911 dispatcher. We live traumatized. A few examples. 1. Coaching a little girl through CPR on her dad because she was literally the only one there old enough to maybe make an effort. The fear and pain in her voice broke my heart. It felt like forever for someone to get to her. He didn't make it. I insisted on every single responder telling her she did a good job and that it wasn't her fault, and suggesting to mom a therapist for kiddo. But I still worry she thinks it is her fault. I think about her daily. 2. Baby died when co-sleeping parents rolled over onto it. They were otherwise good. Concerned parents and not first-timers either. They were just so tired. There is a scream, cry noise parents make when you tell them there is nothing you can do. I can still hear it. Never co-sleep. 3. Elderly lady called 911 complaining about depression. Officer told her she could go to the bathroom as we were walking in to take her to the hospital. Gunshot. Kicked the door in. Blood everywhere and she's dead. She only called us because she didn't want her kids to be the one to find her. The worst ones I really can't talk about. But those hurt. My family only just realized how much I compartmentalize and don't tell them. Edit. You're all very kind. I appreciate the awards, my first ever, and support. Honestly, the best way to help us is to just do that. A little word of appreciation even from a random person in a convenience store helps a lot. The EMTs, paramedics, and dispatchers kind of get forgotten and left in the shadow of fire and police, so the little nods mean a lot. Be kind. Be safe. I'd love to meet you all. But I'd prefer it if you're not a patient. I was like 8 and my mom left me to watch my 2-year-old brother at a park while she drank and talked with some friends of hers. My dad came and took my brother to use the restroom and I forgot cause I was playing with other kids at the party. She came over and asked where he is and I didn't know. So she grabbed me roughly and started to drag me to look for him before we came over to a guy with crutches who said he saw him go with a man. My mom began to scream at me she hated me and she wished I was dead and it should have been me while I cried with her dragging me. Then we saw my dad and little sister come out of the restroom with my brother. My mom let go and told me to go and play and I didn't and she threatened to give me something to cry about as I sulked on a park bench before my dad sent me off to go play. Losing my dad and my best friend to suicide. Working a customer-facing job through the pandemic. In the last 2 years I've been slapped. Spat at, x4 to 5 I lost count. Coughed on. Cursed out. Threatened with murder. Shoved. Stalked and had beverages thrown at me because the health department mandated masks in my business or they would shut us down. IDGAS what your politics are. Nothing gives you the right to assault someone just trying to do their job. My friend lost her baby full term. Went into labor and the baby died in her womb during labor. After she delivered him she couldn't bear to look at him or hold him, but also didn't want him taken away. She asked me to hold him for her. I held that baby all day. In the beginning he looked just like he was sleeping with a blue tinge to his lips, but by the end of the day his body was deteriorating quickly. It was so hard to witness the slow decay of something so precious and innocent. To this day, even though the image is vivid as ever, I can't bring myself to describe how he looked. At that point I struggled to even look at the baby. But that's when she wanted to hold him and look at him and I had to gently explain to her that he did not look the same as he did when she delivered him and that it might be too traumatic for her. We agreed she needed to remember him as the beautiful baby he was. I wrapped him gently and covered his face. She gave him a kiss all covered up. The nurses then took him away. One of the most tragic moments of her life and mine. My condolences to all the moms out there who have lost child. I feel for you. My dog died in an accident. I taught her to moan, "I love you." I hear her all the time. My sick mom gets me a kitten for Christmas when I was 6. My father throws a fit because cats belong outside. Throws the kitten outside in -10 weather with just an overturned bucket for shelter. The kitten froze to death. All alone because I wasn't allowed outside. I am in therapy for this among other things. But thinking about it too much turns me into a sobbing mess and I have to hug the cats I currently have. Where do I start? When I was 4 my mother put me and my 2-year-old brother outside so she could take a nap. He ran into traffic and was run over by a van, mail truck. When the ambulance came, I was left alone until my grandmother was able to come get me. Many members of my family still blame me for what happened to my brother. I am in my 60s and she and I still have this wall between us. She continued to push childcare on me. And I lost out on many childhood experiences because of it. My grandparents were mentally abusive because of it. I married an abusive man. Because that is what I was used to. He divorced me when I got cancer. It has taken me a long time and a lot of therapy to recover from the first 40 years of my life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.